How do we know what to teach and assess? When I taught second grade, a student approached me one day and asked how tall I was. I said, "Take a guess." He took a step back, pointed at my toes, and started counting as he moved his finger higher and higher. He got to the top of my head and concluded, "You're 14. Satisfied, he moved on to his next curiosity. While we know that is obviously not how you figure out someone's accurate height, it does remind us of the importance of certain things being consistent. We use standard measurement to make sure we're talking about the same thing when we say something is 5 feet long or 30 pounds. In a similar way, academic standards guide teachers in making sure they focus their efforts on important concepts and skills for the grade level and/or course they teach. They are statements about what is important to learn. They don't dictate the curriculum or how those things will be learned. Minnesota state standards exist for math, reading, science, social studies, Phy-Ed, and the arts. School districts make their own standards for health, world language, and technology education. There are also organizations that create standards for other things like social emotional learning and 21st century skills, though many of these are not formally adopted by states as requirements. There's so much that could be learned. People had to come together and decide which things are important for everyone to know. Experts gathered together, debated about the importance of different topics and skills, and finally settled on the standards used by teachers throughout the system. Even in the required standards, there's not enough time for students to master everything in our K-12 system. In 2003, Marzano did an analysis of all the standards to estimate how long it would take to reasonably master everything. His conclusion was it would take 22 years to master the 3,500 benchmarks in the typical K-12 system. Marzano has two main recommendations in light of this analysis. The first is that students in any given school district should receive a consistent set of curriculum, regardless of who their teacher is or which school they go to. This is called guaranteed curriculum. The other important recommendation is to plan for what will actually fit into the available time, which is called viable curriculum. In order to create both a guaranteed and viable curriculum, districts must prioritize the standards to make sure the most important things are mastered first. Marzano suggests this is the number one way schools can improve their outcomes with all students. Schmoker agrees that focus is the number one problem in our system. Prioritizing what students should learn is the most important foundation for all assessment systems. Once you know what students will learn, all the planning, instruction, assessment, and intervention and enrichment efforts can be aligned. Lack of focus, haphazard or random instruction, and assessment is at the core of most achievement problems. In order to prioritize, it requires a deep understanding of the standards. The analysis includes looking at each standard to determine the degree to which they reflect these important concepts. Leverage means asking the question, does this standard apply in many contexts and across disciplines? Readiness means asking, do students need to master this in order to be ready for the next level? And endurance means, is this standard important and meaningful far beyond the scope of this particular grade level or course? From there, it requires distinguishing between standards that are must-knows versus nice-to-knows. While everything could be considered nice to know, that doesn't help with prioritizing. At some point, we have to decide that something is more important than something else to get to the list of actual must-knows. Using the leverage, readiness, and endurance framework is a useful way to guide the debates that inevitably arise when doing this work. One common question is, how many standards should be in the list of must-knows? Marzano recommends between 5 and 7 priority or power standards per grade level or course. Once the most important 5 to 7 standards are identified, all instruction and assessment becomes focused on those things first. Extra time can be used to teach and assess other standards. Every unit, lesson, and intervention should connect back to one or more of the priority standards. That means if second graders absolutely must be able to subtract 2-digit numbers before 3rd grade, intervention groups won't be focused on identifying parallel lines until all students master subtraction. Many teachers find it refreshing to hone in on very clear priorities. One benefit of this kind of focus is that it becomes easier to communicate learning goals to students, while also filtering out distractions that so easily compete with the established priorities. When communicated well, any student should be able to answer the question, "What are you learning right now?" no matter what they're learning. When teachers get clear about what students are going to learn, it's far easier for them to help them. The standards guide us in deciding what students should know and be able to do in each grade. And standards must be prioritized because there are far too many to guarantee that everyone will master everything. Priorities are the foundation for a systematic assessment program.